Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Yardstick webinar. Delighted that you could join us. So, they say that you shouldn't meet your heroes. Today, I'm breaking this rule because we're joined by one of my marketing heroes, Marcus Sheridan, author of They Ask, You Answer. Marcus, thank you for being here and spending an hour with us to answer our questions.
Happy to be here, and hopefully I'll still be someone's hero at the end of this. Maybe make new ones, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, my 12-year-old daughter, Amy, is on half term today, and she's joining us on this webinar. So you may be a
Nice.
marketing hero by the end of this.
I'd like to think she's going to learn more in the next hour than she will in 6 months of public schooling. But let's see what happens.
We will find out. So, Dan, let's do a bit of housekeeping first of all, and then we will dive straight into this.
Sure thing, housekeeping. So as always, I'm Dan, the head of branding and design here at Yardstick. So a big welcome to the newbies and regulars among us, newbies being Phil's daughter, Amy. Hi, Amy. If you've ever been to one of our webinars before, you'll know that we encourage lots of participation in the forms of questions and comments. Now, obviously, we've got a very special guest here with us today in the shape of Marcus Sheridan. So Phil will lead with his own questions, but we will pause at regular intervals to read yours out too, which brings me to an important point. So over the years, we've created a very safe space here in our webinars. There are no silly questions, so don't hold back. Speaking to Marcus earlier, he's happy to tackle tough questions, easy questions, you name it. So make the most out of this hour. I think it's clear Phil certainly is planning to. And you can do this by using the Q&A box or the chat function. So I'll be monitoring both throughout the session. And to assist that effort, we've got our client engagement manager, Abby, here. So she'll be answering a few of the questions directly in the chat and providing links to any resources or things we mention during the next hour. Finally, no doubt you'll want to rewatch this. I know I certainly will. So Abby will also be making sure that a recording of the session and any show notes will be arriving in your inbox later today. Right, shall we kick this off? So Phil, Marcus, over to you.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you. So, Marcus, let's talk about the book, They Ask, You Answer. It's revolutionized how a lot of business owners think about marketing and content marketing. Can you just talk a bit about the history and its core philosophy?
Yeah, so the quick 101 on the history of the book is I started a swimming pool company in 2001 with a couple of friends, and we were trying to grow the business, and we were to a degree, but then in 2008 we had the worldwide economic collapse, and that was a really difficult time for pool companies, and we were almost out of business. I mean, it looked like we were going to file bankruptcy, and it was during this time of stress and worry that I started to really study how buyers had changed, because I had changed myself, and we'd all started to change by that point. We were just leaning way more into the internet, and I was just thinking, look, I know that I'm changing, my buyers are changing. The internet is the future. It's pretty obvious to me. And so that's when I discovered what was known as inbound marketing at the time from HubSpot. And what I heard as I just really studied inbound and studied content marketing was, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns, I mean, really obsess over them. And then if you're willing to address those things online, well, then you might save your business. And so I said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to become essentially the Wikipedia of fiberglass swimming pools. And within 6 months of, well, let me backtrack. So in that moment, in that realization, I said, all right, I'm going to brainstorm all these questions that I've ever gotten, all these fears, all these concerns. I'm going to write them all down. And I wrote them all down, and I had a couple hundred that were written down. And then over the next couple of years, I addressed each one through text and video. Put that content online, put it on our website, and we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world doing that. And it saved the business. We eventually became a very large manufacturer. We became the first franchise of fiberglass pools in the world too. It was a crazy, crazy ride. And of course, I started writing about that, Phil. And as I was writing about that journey, I started to have companies say, hey, could you teach us how to do that? Or could you speak about that? And it led to me becoming a full-time speaker. And I have a company that helps other companies do They Ask You Answer now. So it has really, really been wild. I never dreamt that, just answering people's questions, really, that's, I mean, what it boils down to, would lead to such an extraordinary adventure, for me personally, and so much impact on businesses worldwide, especially, I mean, just so many small businesses that are just willing to think differently and do differently. A lot of folks say that, it's like folks will ask me, like, who does this work for? And it can work for anybody, but who it really works for is companies that are willing to do things differently than they've been done in their space, which is why you don't see a lot of enterprise, corporation style businesses, like big companies doing this, because they don't generally think outside the box. Whereas you take that small business owner, he or she's got nothing to lose. They're like, I'm just going to send this. They got to pay their rent. And now all of a sudden they're willing to have conversations that haven't been had in their space before. And that's what They Ask You Answer is.
So it sounds as though the They Ask You Answer philosophy is going to be perfect for a lot of people on this call who are financial advisors, planners, and mortgage brokers who typically run smaller businesses.
That's right. If people say, well, who's it perfect for? Well, if people have a lot of questions about that product or service you sell, it does very, very well, right? And of course, the primary objective to this, though, if we just bullet it down to its most simple core, Phil, would be, for you as a business, is it important to you that you become the most known and trusted brand in your market, wherever you are? So if you're a mortgage broker and you're wherever you are, you're in Dundee, Scotland, do you want to become the most known and trusted brand in that market? If you follow the principles of They Ask You Answer, I mean, really follow them, you're going to do that. And we see it over and over again. We almost never see exceptions. Now, there are a few businesses in the world where there's very, very few questions, and people, maybe it's the restaurant they're going to on a whim. And that's not necessarily a big time They Ask You Answer business, although there's certainly things that company should be doing that is found in the book. But for the most part, anytime that there's a lot of trust that's needed and someone is asking questions and they don't want to make a mistake and they want to choose the right thing, that's when it's a home run.
And there are very few sectors that need that trust between client and supplier as much as financial advice and financial planning.
Well, that's one of the massive ones. And the problem with that industry is so many financial advisors are so stuck on this idea of, we have compliance issues, or we've got regulation, we've got this, we got that. And so therefore we can't talk about these things. And let me just say now that really the perfect description of the framework is, they ask, in other words, they're thinking it, they're searching it, they're fearing it. You not necessarily answer, you address as well as you can. And this is incredibly important because, yes, there are some questions, especially, let's say, for financial advisors, where you might not be able to give an exact answer. That's okay. It doesn't mean you can't address the question, the worry, the need, the fear. And so oftentimes, it's simply the ones that are willing to address it. They're the ones that are winning. They're the ones that are becoming the most known and the most trusted. But those that say, oh, I can't go there, I can't even talk about that, that's not true. I've done this enough times to know what compliance looks like. And if you understand it and if you follow it, you can always address the thing in some way.
You can. And this then leads to breaking down another barrier. So compliance is, for some advisors, a barrier in their heads. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the barrier is more in here than it is in reality. But we ran a LinkedIn poll a few weeks ago. 52% of advisors said that knowing what to create content about is a barrier. They don't know what to create content about. Just talk, if you would, about how your philosophy helps solve that problem.
Yeah. Well, I think we way overcomplicate this idea of what should I produce content about.
Mhm.
If you have ears to hear and eyes to see, you are constantly addressing questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns that your potential customers or clients have. You're doing it all the time. All you have to do is just take one sales call and pay attention to every single question you're asked. You know, when I started with They Ask You Answer with my swimming pool company, I would sit in a home with the couple that were, looking at a pool. And every time they would ask me a question, I would literally think to myself, "Oh, have I addressed that well on my website yet?" Because usually there's a reason why they're asking. They're asking in that context there because either they hadn't found it or it just wasn't there. Both of which to me were not acceptable. If I was getting the question or the fear all the time, like the whole idea is that we have got to, there's this, and I know we're going to probably talk about this, but we know that our average customer today, average buyer today, has gone through 80% of the buyer's journey before they reach out to an advisor, or to a salesperson, to a company, whomever. So what this means is, and this is all of us, because you all have experience with this, we're more informed than we've ever been. We're vetting companies to death. We want to make sure that we know enough so as to not make a mistake once we talk to the company, once we make the purchase or whatever the thing is. And so that's what we know. And so as companies, we've got to win that initial 80%. When they're vetting us online and we don't even know they're there, we better win that. And how do you win that? Well, you got to be willing to talk about what others in your space are not willing to talk about. You got to be willing to show what others aren't willing to show. You got to be willing to sell in a way that others aren't willing to sell. And you better be more human in the process of doing that. Those are just four really just clear pillars. Now, in terms of talking about what others are not willing to talk about, showing what others aren't willing to show, you want to start with the big five, because the big five, we address it heavy in the book, and it's really what in so many ways They Ask You Answer has become known for. And these are the 5 subjects that every single buyer, consumer, when they're making an important decision, they are researching these 5 things. In fact, for any of your listeners right now, if I said to you, what is something that you always research before you buy a product, before you buy a service, before you reach out to a company, what's a subject you always research? Everybody's going to say pricing. Everybody's going to say reviews. Those are the first 2 everybody just think, that's it. Like everybody thinks that. Then there's a few more. And so here are the big 5. As buyers and consumers, we're obsessed with researching these 5 things. Number 1, you want to know cost, price, rates, etc. You want to get a sense for that. And if you can't get a sense for that, you don't tend to move forward because you're just trying to figure out, am I in the game at all? And one thing about pricing is we don't want to be embarrassed when it comes to a conversation about pricing from a vendor. And so we will literally not have conversations for the fear of being embarrassed. So that's number 1. You want to understand cost, price, rates, etc. Number 2, problems, fears, worries. We just call it problems. But problems are rooted in, okay, if I make this decision, if I buy this thing, or if I work with this company, how could it go wrong? How could it blow up in my face? In the context of a fiberglass swimming pool is, could it crack? Could it pop out of the ground? Is it ugly? Does it look like a bathtub in my yard? Like literally, these are the questions, the fears that people have. So if I'm not a very intentional or intelligent pool guy, I am going to ignore those questions and not talk about them at all and just hope to never get asked about it. Or I can have a brain and use common sense and address it head on. So problems is the second one. So think about all the fears that people have. And oftentimes they start with, somebody told me that, or is it true that, or I've heard that. And these are just fear-based, problem-based, concern-based statements that they make when they're getting serious about buying something. All right, so that's the second one. So we got cost and problems, and then you've got comparisons. We love to compare online. We love stacking stuff up against each other. We compare brands, we compare products, we compare services, we compare methods. We are just constantly comparing stuff online. You want to feel like you've got a gauge of like the whole line of options and where they stack up with each other. Now, after comparisons, we love reviews. The thing about reviews, though, is we don't just want the good reviews. We want the good, the bad, and the ugly, and this is important, right? So if you're talking reviews, we want to see both sides of the coin. Call that the law of the coin, because we want to see both sides of it. And then finally, you've got best, all right, which is best, most. So somebody in your area might be searching, top financial advisors, for, just some specific thing. It could be for retirees or something like that, right? So this is what people are searching all the time. Best, top, most. Think about how many times you've gone online and searched best plus another phrase. I mean, you've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, best. Those are the big five. What's so fascinating is buyers are obsessed with them. This is the whole 80% is consumed with those five things, and yet businesses as a whole don't like to talk about them. In fact, if we polled your audience right now, Phil, and I said, what percentage of the content you have on your website is related to those five things right there, like very closely related to them, they would say less than 10%. And that's not okay. And this is why we struggle to drive more trust. This is why we struggle to become the most known brand in our market. And we have to do better.
Let's drill down into one of those, and that's about pricing. So we've done plenty of research around this, and about 5% of financial advisors and planners disclose their pricing online. Yeah, at website stage on that digital journey.
Yeah,
sounds as though you feel more people should do more of that.
So let's just analyze this for a second. And the only way that you will be able to understand how your customers feel is if you analyze your own behavior first. The best marketers and really the best business people are extremely self-aware as to how they behave online. And so as you're listening to this, I just want you to be very honest and answer these questions. You don't have to do it out loud, Phil, Dan, Abby, but I mean, just generally speaking. So if I said to anybody that's listening to this, have you researched how much something cost online in the last year? You'd say yes. And then if I said, okay, so when you're researching how much something costs online and you cannot find that information on the website, what's the emotion you experience? You'd say frustrated. I'd say, why? You'd say, because I can't get what I want. And so I'd say to you then, well, when you're in that moment, you're feeling really frustrated. Do you say to yourself, well, I'm sure it's on this website somewhere. It's got to be. I'm just going to keep on looking until I find it. No, that's ridiculous, because we know the average person looking for cost and price information, if they can't find it within 10 seconds, they're going to leave. All right. We see that over and over again. Okay. Now, the second thing I would ask you is, okay, so in that moment of frustration, when you're on that website and you can't find cost and price, do you ever say to yourself, well, of course they're not discussing cost, price, or rates. They're a value-based business. I'm going to call them on the phone instead. And the answer once again is no, you don't do that, because you as the buyer, you as the searcher, you keep doing what? Well, you keep searching. You search until what happens? Well, you search until generally you find what you're looking for. And whoever gives you what you're looking for, in most cases, you're going to give them your business. And if not your business, at least you're going to give them first contact, first phone call. And the reality is, the real reason we get so upset as buyers, consumers, is because we know that they know as the business the answer, or at least a semblance of the answer. And because we know they know the answer and they're not giving it to us, we now feel like they're hiding something from us. And the moment you feel like someone is hiding anything from you online, trust is gone. And that is the business we're all in. This is why, everything about They Ask You Answer is, how can you become that most trusted brand? Will it induce more trust? And so instead of arguing with what has been proven by data, I want you to hear it and say, yeah, but I mean, I know he's a pool guy, but would it induce more trust? And if the answer is yes, well, then now the job becomes, well, how do we do that? Now, there's three reasons why companies say we can't talk about cost and price. The first reason is they say, well, Marcus, every job is different. It depends. It's a bespoke solution, etc., etc. And so at that point, I say to you, okay, that's fine. Every job is different. Can you help me understand? If someone asked you, can you help me understand the factors that would drive the cost of your service up, let's say? Could you do that? Yes or no? And they'd say, well, yeah, of course I could. And you can name them off. If I said to you, can you help me understand the factors that would keep costs down? Could you address that? Yes, you could. If I said to you, you gave me a quote for a product or service, your competitor gave me a quote for, their product, their service, and there seems like there's a delta between you. Can you help me understand why there's a delta in the industry, why some are more expensive, some are less expensive? Someone would say, yes, of course I could do that. And of course, if I asked anybody listening to this, have you ever had to answer any of those questions before? You'd say yes. And the problem is, if you're saying yes to that, that means there's a clear need in the market. But most people don't ever end up asking you because they can't find it, and because they can't find it, you scare them away. So that's the first reason to hold it depends. Not a good reason, because by explaining why it depends, now you build value. You explain this simple phenomenon called value proposition. The second reason why we don't talk about cost and price is because we say things like, well, I don't want my competitors to find out, which is utterly ridiculous. Because if I ask anybody that has any experience in the game, do you have a pretty decent sense as to what your competitors charge? You would say, yes, I absolutely do. And so if you've got a pretty good sense as to what your competitors charge, it therefore means they've got a great sense as to what you charge. This is like a big secret, non-secret. Everybody acts like nobody knows what everybody's charging, when in reality, everybody's got a pretty decent sense as to what everybody else is charging. And besides that, when was the last time your competitors paid your bills? Like never. And so we need to let that one go too. It just doesn't hold any weight. The third reason why people say, I don't like to talk about cost and price, or I can't do it, is because, well, if they see that I'm more expensive, or if they see my comp structure, we might scare them away. What we all just agreed with our own behavior is a thing that actually scares us away when we're researching a company, a product, a service, isn't when a company educates us well, but rather when they don't talk about the thing. It's no different than the psychology of if you were thinking about going to a restaurant, and before you went to the restaurant, you looked at their menu online and there was no pricing online. You wouldn't go most of the time. Most people don't go. And it's not because you can't afford the restaurant. You can afford any restaurant you want to go to, probably, if you're listening to this. But the reason why you don't go is because this moment they leave the menu blank, they plant a seed of doubt. And when seeds of doubt exist, inertia occurs and people stop. They just don't take action, right? It's the same reason why, if you're listening to this right now, you've been on a shopping cart page before, and you were ready to make a purchase, and you might have been pulling out your credit card, but suddenly you notice that there was this place for a coupon code, and you're like, oh, whoa, coupon code. I don't have a coupon code. And in that moment, what did you do? Did you make the purchase? No, you probably looked for the stinking coupon code. A second ago, you were looking for the purchase. And what's really crazy is oftentimes when people now can't find the coupon code, they don't end up buying, which is nuts, because they were just going to buy. Why did they not now buy? Because they planted a seed of doubt. And so doubt is the business killer, my friends. Your job as an entrepreneur is to remove all doubt. That's your job. The only way you do that is by addressing these fundamental fears head on.
That's fabulous. I think you said at the start of this webinar, Marcus, to the audience, said at the start of the webinar earlier while we were preparing, that he was happy to take difficult questions. So from the 95% of people who don't publish their fees online, if anybody wants to put a comment in the chat and challenge maybe what Marcus said, and then Marcus, you can knock it down. I think that would be fabulous. Dan, we've got a question in, or a comment in, from Jonathan that I think talks to some of the stuff Marcus was talking about earlier about addressing people's problems through content.
Absolutely. So around 10, 15 minutes ago, Marcus, you were talking about why wouldn't you give answers? And Jonathan says you don't want to give the answer away for free sometimes. And obviously with financial advisors, financial planners, they are paid to give answers. So where does that line, I think Jonathan's question is, sit between giving too much away and giving just the right amount away?
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I'll be frank with you because I love you, even though I don't know you personally. I can tell you that I love you and I want you to be successful. Oftentimes, we believe that the information we have is dramatically more proprietary than it actually is. And let me give you an example. Here in the US, and I don't know what an equivalent you all have for this, but here in the US, there's this company called the Geek Squad. And the Geek Squad, what they do is a really big brand. And they fix people's home computer problems, right? They're tied to some of the big retailers and whatnot. And that's what they do. So they're a tech service company. Now they've got a pretty, quite a prolific, they ask you answer style approach to how they do their online presence. And they really teach people how to do the things that they do. And somebody once asked the CEO, somebody once said to the CEO, said, you're teaching people how to do the thing you do. Aren't you like cutting off your nose to spite your face? He said, don't you realize my number one customer is the person that tries to do it themselves? So it's no different than when I started with my swimming pool company. I was one of the first to show people how to winterize open and close swimming pools. Now all the service companies said, we don't want to show people how to winterize their pools, because then they'll start winterizing their own pools and we won't get that business from a service perspective. I'm like, whatever. And so, I produced this video, and then what's the main comment people make? Man, I don't want anything to do with that. That looks way too hard. That looks way too difficult. Okay. And so you look at They Ask You Answer. They Ask You Answer, the book. It's pretty clear as to like, here's the framework. And yet, I have a company that generates millions of dollars a year, and all it does is guide people with They Ask You Answer. That's all it does. That's the whole business. The whole business is based on a book. And I will tell people, like, it's when they reach out, I'm telling, it's like, so I'm going to make sure you do that which you already know you should do. That's what you're going to pay me for. And that's what most consultants and most advisors actually do. They just remind you of that which you already know. And so if you look at an advisor and look at the ones that we trust the most, it's like we want, if you have a choice to work with, let's say, 7 advisors and you're debating between all 7, 6 of them hold everything back. But one of the 7 really just tells you everything. What do you think you're going to do? You think you're going to just try it yourself? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to go with the one that gave you everything. And oh, by the way, let's say that person did try it themselves. When they fail, they're come to you anyway. This is just how it works. And just one other thought on this. Buyers, they can get it. They can get the thing. I don't ever assume buyers are dumb. I assume that eventually they're going to find it from someone. My mindset is, I want them to find it from me. I want them to get it from me every single time. If there's any conversation that's happening in my space, I want it to be from me. And so that's the mindset of the champions. And it actually goes back fundamentally to, do you have a scarcity mentality or do you have an abundance mentality? Because if you've got an abundance mentality, you're like, man, there's plenty of room on top for everybody here. I mean, if we're just doing that, I'm going to do great, and that's how it's going to work. And what's wild about this too, is when you really, really do this well and you become the most known and trusted brand in your market and you become the thought leader of your space, you just start to see all these revenue streams and different ways that you can monetize your IP that you never imagined possible. I mean, it's just this is how it goes. And so there's literally probably not a question a financial advisor has where they should hold back in terms of teaching the world, because inevitably the person's going to say, well, now I want to talk to you about my situation. And because that's the thing too, is the customer, the buyer, they're hearing you and they're like, man, this guy, this gal, man, they just know their stuff so much. And I'd love to work with them. And, with my situation, I got this going on, I got this going on, and I'm worried about this. Right. And so that's what they're going to pay you for. The ability to take that another step further and to customize it based on their very specific needs. Right. And so, yeah, I'm just not buying it, Jonathan. Love you, buddy. I'm not picking it up. Nope.
Let's knock another one down. Give you another go, Marcus. Dan, what does Gareth have to say about these pages?
Okay, so Gareth says, financial planning can be bespoke, and the fees will depend on the complexity of what we need to advise on. And we don't know until we know about the client. Isn't it like asking a builder to give me a price for a building extension without telling them exactly what we need?
Well, the way that you do pricing and I want you to, there's a few different ways. And if you're listening right now, what I'm about to tell you could make you a whole lot of revenue for your company if you just do this. All right. The first two things that you can do is number one, you create let's say a fees or a pricing page. Now, in that, 80% of that page or video, I want you to create both. All right. 80% of it is teaching them how the industry works. So you take financial planners. Somebody says, "What is it? How much does it cost to work with a financial planner? Like, what's the whole, how is the fees? Like, how's it go?" Right? So a lot of people don't know. Some people do know. Some people have had experience with only specific ways of working with a financial planner in terms of comp structures. And so what you spend the majority of the article or the video on is explaining how comp structures work within the financial planning space. As you know, there's a multiplicity of styles or structures. So you want to explain them, explain the pros and the cons to each one. Keep in mind, a lot of people don't even know what a fiduciary means. Like, they don't even know what the word stinking means. So it's your job to make sure that they are, okay, light bulb on, I get the different options that I have. This is before you say what you even do. Now, once you've done that, then you'd say, well, in terms of working with our agency, in terms of working with me, or however you want to say it, in order to give you a price, here's the questions that I would need to ask you. And you like literally list all those questions out. And then you say, now, how much does the average person spend? So with a swimming pool, I might say the average person, when they work with river pools, spends between $90,000 and $130,000. We have a few that go less than that, not many, and we have some that go more than that. But the most consistent range, 80%, are between $90,000 and $130,000. People appreciate that to death, okay? And so we want to give them a general feel. But all of this happens after you've explained how the industry works. And once you've explained how the industry works, then you can explain what your comp structure is based on what you've just told them, right? So you can say, now, based on what I just told you, the way we do it here at Sheridan and Sons is like this, okay? So that's the first thing you should do. Another thing you should do, and maybe actually this should be first, and this, because this means leads for your company tonight if you do this. So I developed a software called PriceGuide.ai. So what PriceGuide.ai is, it is the simplest and fastest way for you to give a price estimate real time to your customers on your website without them having to talk to you first. And you're like, geez, Marcus, I don't even understand how that would work. Well, what we know is that today, 75% of all buyers say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. And what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean they hate salespeople. They just don't want to talk to a salesperson until they feel like they're ready. And again, until they feel like they won't make a mistake. Now, one of the biggest questions that people have, and I mentioned this earlier, is, am I even in the game? Can I even afford this? Is this even worth a conversation, right? And so a pricing estimator on your website is revolutionary in terms of generating leads that you're not currently getting that you should be getting. So how the tool works is this: you go to Price Guide and you can put in the industry that you're involved with. So you might put in financial planner, and the AI will then say, okay, so if you're a financial planner, I'm going to assume that you need to ask the following questions in order to give them a general rate structure or pricing or comp structure. And so the AI produces for you some of the questions that you would probably want to ask. If you don't like it, you eliminate the question, or you modify the question, or you add additional questions. Now, once you have those questions, because I just want you to think about your sales process. As a financial planner, I'm just going to use that as the example right now. Someone says, I need to know your comp structure. First, you're going to ask questions. Those questions, those exact questions, are the ones that you would build out your pricing estimator with. Then, with each one of the questions, you would put a number or a range that would impact the estimate that you're going to give to the person at the end. And so once that is done, you've now put it in, and the AI will help you produce copy that helps explain how your pricing works. And then it gives you a snippet of code. And that snippet of code you can put on your website, and you can immediately start generating leads that you wouldn't have generated before. Let me give you an example. I'll give you a UK example. And again, as you hear this, don't say, well, that's not what I sell. Come on, think bigger than that. You get paid to think bigger. You're a leader, so think like a leader. So I've got a company in Scotland called Gillies and McKay Sheds. All right, Gillies and McKay. So Gillies and McKay, they make custom sheds. They send them around the UK. Now, they were doing the Ask You Answer really well. I mean, they had a lot of pricing information on their website. They had price lists on their website. So price lists for their sheds. So they came to me and they said, Marcus, we want to try Price Guide. And I was like, I'm not sure if it's going to make a big impact. You've got all the pricing information there. Well, we put it on there and immediately they 5x their leads every day since that time they put it out there. And they've closed already. And they put it on there like 6 weeks ago because it's a new product. I just developed it. They've already closed about 200,000 pounds in business from this pricing estimator on their website. And I was like, well, how did this happen? So the reason why it was so effective, even though they already had a price list on their website, which is more specific than any advisor is ever going to have. The reason why it worked is because the moment somebody feels like they are designing their price, there's this phenomenon in psychology called sunk costs. And so because they've invested more in this particular company or in this plan, now they feel this pull to want to work for that company or with that company. It's no different than if you've gone on 100 dates with someone versus one date with someone. There's a good chance you feel like, man, I've invested so much in this relationship. I want to see if it's going to work, right? And so these pricing estimators, I'm having like companies now all over the world put them on their website, and we're just seeing phenomenal results. And the thing is, you can make the range as big as you want it to be. It's just beautiful. And the way that I set it up, because I try to run a business exactly like I would want to be treated, you don't even have to put in a credit card to start using the tool. It doesn't ask you for a credit card. You use it for 2 weeks. If you start getting leads, you're like, this is awesome. I'm going to keep using it. And then you pay $20 a month. All right. And if it doesn't work, you take it off. But guess what? It works, especially if you highlight it on your homepage. And the key is, if you highlight this on the homepage and you say something like, get an instant, that was a funny word, get an instant estimate, all right, or get an instant quote, or get an instant whatever you want to call it. And then now the person's like, you mean I can get this right now and I don't have to talk to a salesperson yet? Everybody does it. But in the process of doing that, you get their email. Now you're building your database. And this is key for you as a business to be successful. And so you're building your database, and now you can remarket and you can communicate to these people with your newsletter or whatever that thing is that you're doing that's helping you be in touch with them. That's really, really powerful. So I suggest anybody that's on this call, you could be using Price Guide, and literally you could put it on your website within 30 minutes and generate leads from it tonight. It's that easy to use.
How do people get hold of it?
Just priceguide.ai.
That works. Maybe Dan or Abby could look it up and put a link in here.
Eileen said, Instament. I love the new word. So do I. I think it's awesome. We can claim it as our own. We founded it here today on the yardstick.
Right. I want to talk about this digital journey, because one of the key data points, the standout data points in the book, is that 70-80% of a consumer's buying decision is made before they meet the salesperson. So in 2024, moving into 2025, how does that stat impact marketing plans for financial advisors and planners?
Well, it just means you can't afford to think that you're going to have a sustainable business without having a major focus on brand and on marketing. You can't do it. I can't think that just a few additional trips to the golf course and a few more handshakes is going to carry the day. That's extremely rare for most entrepreneurs at this point in time. And so you got to win the 80%. Now, it's getting harder to win the 80%. AI is going to make it harder. This is why, though, they Ask You Answer is really perfect for anyone that it says, I want to be ready for the impact of AI, which is already affecting all of us. Because the future of search, the way people search, is really based on signals. So every piece of content that's in the universe right now that goes out there is a signal to two parties that are really important to each one of us. The first party is humans, and the second party is artificial intelligence. So as humans and artificial intelligence receive those signals, they get a perception about brand. So brand is very important for artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence cares about your brand. You know, when we started with ChatGPT a couple years ago, people were using it purely for creation. You know, they're just creating stuff with it. But today, you're already using ChatGPT as a recommendation tool, whereas you weren't using it like that 2 years ago. So you might be saying, hey, you know, I live in Louth, great small town in the UK, by the way. I'm just using my son used to live in Louth for a very short period of time. Okay. All right. I live in Louth. Who are the best financial advisors in Louth? Right. So that's like, and right now, ChatGPT is going to come up with that information. People are using it for that info right now, right? And so we have to understand that these signals, this is going to be a huge deal. Your success as a business is going to rise and fall on your ability to send out brand signals, but to two parties, AI and to humans.
And how does social proof fit into this, that digital journey? How does social proof help the 80%
Yeah.
someone to them rather than somebody else?
So somebody says, what is social proof? Social proof is basically what the world says about you and the signals they send out that say they support you. So that could be a review, it could be a testimonial, it could be them going to Google and putting in that 5-star, it could go into Yelp or whatever that thing is, right? So reviews matter, and they matter a lot because we're in the age of signals. And with that being said, you've got to do whatever it takes to get more social proof. It's very, very important. Now, one thing for any local-based business, one thing that still matters very, very much is Google My Business matters very much, and local search matters very much. It's going to affect your ability to generate the leads that you want. And I've worked with a bunch of location, geocentric businesses, and the ones that do the best with this, Phil, are the ones that have a very intentional program to get more reviews. That's it. It's not lackadaisical at all. It's intentional. They have it set up, it's structured. And if you say to them, how do you solicit reviews? They have an answer. They have an answer because there's a system, there's a structure in place. So if you don't have a system or a structure in place, there's a pretty solid chance that you're missing out on a ton of potential visitors and leads that you could be having. And so put that system in place, figure out what it is, plan it. It matters. And I think it matters more and more going forward. And once again, it's going to be a major signal to AI that, hey, this is a company I should recommend.
And if I was a salesperson right now, I would be explaining that 187% of advisors we work with, they've got 178% more vouch for reviews and 286% more Google reviews than the average financial advisor. But I'm not a salesperson.
And I know you don't like to brag about yourself, but I can say, when you're essentially doubling the reviews your advisors get, the value on that is 10x whatever they're spending with your agency. There's no question about it. And so this is an essential for their success. And to have a company that's willing to do that and that has a track record of doing it effectively, and obviously you've tracked it very seriously. It's one of your I can see it's one of your KPIs as a company. That is impressive, and it should be well noted. So good on you all for making sure your clients are getting found a lot more in diverse ways, reviews being one of them.
And then if people get past the reviews, a consumer gets past the reviews and through to the firm's website. Just talk about, in the book, you talk about 7 key priorities for websites. Just talk a bit more about those, if you would, Marcus.
Gosh, it's been so long, I can't even remember what my priorities are. Like rip them off really quick, Phil. A few of them off. I mean, because I might start naming things that are outside of the 7.
You name whatever you think, Marcus. You name whatever you think that are important on a website.
Well, when it comes to your website, I mean, just one thing that I want everybody to do, and the #1 book that's bought with They Ask You Answer is Story Brand. It's the #1 book that's bought with They Ask You Answer. And that's because when it comes to the content on your website and the messaging of said website, you can't get 2 better books for that. They just don't exist in the market. Story Brand really helps you frame the way you guide the visitor through that site experience. And one of the best tests that I do with companies, I just love this test. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to do this. You might freak out for a second, but this is really, really powerful. You can, when somebody comes to your site, I'll give you the test in a second. Are they more interested about you and what you do, or do they care more about them and their problems? And of course, we know the answer is they care about themselves, right? As the great Toby Keith once said, I want to talk about me, I want to talk about I want to talk about #1, my, me, my, right? So they care about themselves. So I want you to go to your homepage right now. If you're listening to this, I want you to count the number of times you use the pronouns we, our, versus the number of times you use the pronoun you, your. So we, our versus you, your. It is going to be clear as day as to who is the hero of your message. Is the hero of your message you and what you do? And it will be if you use the phrase we, our all the time, right? Or it's going to have all about you, your, And so if, let's say you're a financial advisor and you want to have a headline statement to your homepage would be something like, plan your future without the stress. Maybe that's the headline, but immediately it's all about you. And so all you have to do is count the pronouns and you're like, son of a gun, we got us a messaging problem. All right. So that's one thing that you want to do a lot different. Another thing that you want to do different is you want to have what's called a learning center on your website. Learning center is this hub of information that anybody can get their questions answered. Maybe it's within that learning center. It could be your educational articles. It could be your video library. It could be some of the tools that we discussed. Maybe you have a pricing estimator. Maybe you've got some type of like self-selection tool, which, by the way, another great tool for what is self-assessment, because self-service is just a huge movement right now and giving people more ability. One is what a great tool that I love by one of my friends there in the UK, Daniel Priestley, is Score App. I don't know if y'all recommend Score App to your clients there, Phil. Big fan. Really is great for advisors. And so scoreapp.com, just tremendous. Really, really love them. And a big believer in Daniel and his company there. So you want to have a learning center, and you want to have a page that is specific to pricing. Ideally, it's in your navigation bar. It just says pricing. Okay? Have that. There's a bunch of others, but those are some of the majors that are on my mind right now.
I think the we, I versus your is fabulous. I think it works on imagery as well. Look on the imagery on your homepage through your site. How much is your team, the guides, and how much is your clients, the heroes, and how much is stock imagery of husband and wife walking down a beach to signify retirement? Yeah, I think it works both ways.
Yep.
So someone goes.
Yeah, I saw Claire said there, we've got a "Are you ready for a retirement quiz?" That's really, really smart, right? It's really smart because they have to, they're assessing their situation. That's why we call it a self-assessment tool. I know, at Score App, they call it scorecard marketing, but really what we're talking about is self-service tools on your site. And there's 5 types of self-service tools. And each one of these has potential value to anybody that's listening, and they're incredible for lead capture. So you've got self-assessment, which is like a score app, which gives you a score. But then you have self-selection. This one's really, really powerful. Self-selection is when somebody has a question and they're like, what should I choose? Is this plan or that plan the best fit for me? Or another example is, should I use a financial advisor or go it alone? That's a legitimate question. And so what the tool would do, right, is it would ask a series of questions without bias, y'all. Can't be biased. A series of questions that by the end you can give a recommendation, a choice. And so that's what self-selection is. It's essentially a recommendation. Yes, I would recommend that you do use a financial advisor, but here's why. I'll give an example. On my swimming pool site, you can, I literally recommend other types of pools. We have a tool that essentially allows you to figure out, is a fiberglass, a vinyl, or a concrete pool the best swimming pool for me? And we ask you a series of questions, and at the end, we give you a recommendation. Really, really powerful. Get a ton of leads from that. So that is a self-selection. Then you got self-scheduling. This does very well sometimes with advisors and whatnot. Self-scheduling is when they're able to schedule time to talk to a human without being forced to talk to a human to schedule the time. All right. So that's a self-scheduling tool. And what works extremely well, let's say that you have an actual firm. This is really powerful. This is a game changer here. So let's say you have an advisory firm and you've got like 6 financial advisors. If you had a tool on the site that allowed them to look at the 6 financial advisors, see their face, read their bio, and then choose who they want to work with, forget about it. Awesome. Crazy. I've had a bunch of experience with companies I've worked with where we did that, where the person got to choose their salesperson. Crazy results. I mean, just like doubling closing rates. I mean, inarguable data. So that's one. Then you got the self-pricing tool. Then you have self-configurators. A self-configurator is when somebody can build or design something on their own. So let me give you something that would be super progressive for a financial advisor. If you're a financial advisor and you're like, okay, I end up, there's like 3 major types of plans that somebody might use. All right. Well, could you help them to design that plan themselves without having to use you first? Because in a perfect world, they come to you and they say, man, I've already built the thing. I already have the thing built out because I did it on your site. So that's incredibly powerful. That's a self-configurator. So you got self-pricing, self-assessment, uh, self-configurators. I'm losing them all in my head right now. You got the 5, right? But those are the 5. They work really, really well, and I hope everyone considers putting them on your site.
Thank you, Marcus. So we've got 5 or 6 minutes left. If anybody's got any more questions they want to ask Marcus, put them in the chat. I have 2 more that are very specific, Marcus. So every so often, a financial planner will come to us and say something along the lines of, I only work with high net worth. Everyone defines high net worth differently, but I only work with high net worth. Social proof doesn't work with those. They are dealing with clients of a certain value, and they feel that social proof doesn't work above a certain value of investable assets. Just do you buy into that, or do you not buy into that?
It's BS. It's just not true. What happens, though, the reason why people say that is because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually. That's the reason why it's happening. So they felt when they entered the game, the industry, that the way that it worked was purely through referrals, purely through just the networking and the word of mouth. And so that's how they've always gotten their business. So that's how they'll always get their business. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's fine. But to say that's how it works in your industry and that alone, that is utter BS. You're lying to yourself because there's too much empirical data in the world that says, no, actually, you can build an incredible wealth firm by doing it with inbound, by attracting them to you, by building an extraordinary brand where people come to you. That's how it works. And so, I can see why people would say that. But if that's your experience, it's because A, you haven't invested in it. B, your total focus has been the in-person, again, which is fine, and you can build a great life off of that. But if you're trying to scale and do something extraordinary beyond yourself, you're going to have to go beyond just some basic word of mouth.
And as we flip, I just want to flip my last question between marketing and sales, marketing to sales. And we all get ghosted from time to time. I certainly get ghosted from time to time. People on this call will get ghosted from time to time. And there are two emails that have worked a treat for getting ghosted or for waking prospects up. One is the Chris Voss magic email, which I'm sure you've come across. The others is yours, Marcus. I assume you have found.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a bit more about that and why it works?
Yeah, I do a lot of training with sales teams and with selling in general, and just understand how psychology works. And we've all been ghosted before, and the reason why people don't tell us why they've ghosted us is because they fear hurting our feelings. And so understanding that, you have to say the fear and eliminate it. So let's say I'm a pool contractor. So I might say to someone after I've been ghosted and gave them a quote, I send a subject line that says, assuming you found another pool contractor. Now, they open up the email and I might say, hey, Abby, I haven't heard from you for a couple weeks, and I'm assuming this means that you have found another pool contractor, which if you have, that's totally fine. I just wanted to know before I went ahead and took you off of our list. Now, what happens is suddenly a group of people say, whoa, 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 no, I'm so sorry. Oh, I've just been so busy, right? And that's great. Now you're back in the game. And there's another group that will say, yeah, we decided to go this route. But then you learn, and you don't have false hope in your pipeline, because nobody wants false hope in your pipeline. So if you're a financial advisor, you can do the exact same thing, right? Assuming you found another financial advisor for your needs. But then you got to come right back, and in the text of the content, and I think you should do it by video, by the way, but you can do it by text. You say, hey, Phil, I know we've been talking over the last month about, your financial health and your future. And my sense is that because I haven't heard back from you, you've probably chosen another advisor, or this isn't something you're going to pursue at this time. Either way, I'm totally fine with whatever you choose, but I just wanted to confirm with you which one you've chosen before I went ahead and took you off of our list. So if you could let me know, that would be wonderful. And now you're very likely to get a response. Every single time I have a sales team, I'll teach a team to do this. And I'll say, I want you to all send this email right now. And sometimes we'll do it at the beginning of a call. By the end of the call, there's been multiple people that have received a response.
It works. It works beautifully. Yeah, it's uncanny how often it works.
Yep, it does.
Right. If anybody's got any final questions for Marcus, that has been absolutely superb. I'm just going to put up my screen again. And Abby, just get you to talk about the next webinar we've got coming up in November, if you would.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Marcus. Every second of that hour has been absolutely brimming with value, not just for everybody on the call, but for us as well. I think Phil's probably going to block me on Outlook with all the ideas that I'll be pinging across. And yeah, personal experience, I can absolutely speak to the assume you found somebody else email. It is incredible how many times that does chivvy somebody along when you haven't got a response. So if you aren't using that, then please do give it a try. But yes, our next session. Anybody who's been on our webinars previously this year will know we've had some amazing guests. Of course, Marcus, we've also had Rory Sutherland, Andy Bounds, Phil Agnew, and we are continuing the trend next month. We'll be sharing our stage with the very lovely Joe Glover, who is co-founder of the UK's largest marketing community, the Marketing Meetup. And he'll be joining us to talk about all sorts, from building engaged communities to running successful face-to-face events, using social media to engage with your ideal clients, AI, and, as we've spoken about quite a bit today, the importance of reviews and how to get more of them. So we're very, very excited for that one. And as Joe is UK-based, although I'm not sure if he's in Dundee, Louth or otherwise, he will be coming to us at the usual time. So 10 a.m, Wednesday the 20th of November. I will put the link in the chat, but it will also be in the follow-up that Dan mentioned earlier.
Then to stay in touch with Marcus's website, Marcus's socials, we've got the AI tool in the chat as well. We'll put that in the follow-up notes. Dan, over to you for any final comments in the chat.
We don't have any more questions, but I've got one of my own actually, Marcus, if you wouldn't mind satisfying my curiosity. So you mentioned a short while ago that adding the ability to choose your salesperson doubled closing rates. What were some of the factors that led to some people's profiles being chosen more frequently than others?
Wait, ask that one more time. I'm going to make sure I fully understand what you're saying here.
So you mentioned earlier you'd implemented a choose your salesperson tool in one of the businesses you'd worked with.
Yes.
And it had improved closing rates. So people choose their salesperson and then they're more likely to close. When the audience was choosing a salesperson, what were some of the factors that led to some of the salespeople's profiles being chosen more frequently than others?
What's interesting is sometimes you do this with a sales group and some will take it seriously and some won't. By the end, they all take it really, really seriously because they realize the impact it has on them and their business, right? But just what we know more than anything is when we feel like we're in control of our buying process, we are more invested in it, and we feel a duty to move forward because we chose this person and we feel like we already know them. And so the key is you want to see the person, you want to read about the person, and in a perfect world, there's even a video where the person can talk with the potential prospect. And now it's like this, almost like this Uber experience, if you will, it's like a dating app for salespeople or whatever you want to call it, right? Incredibly, incredibly effective.
Thank you, Marcus. There's some great comments coming in the chat. Marcus, just want to say thank you again for the last hour. It's been absolutely fabulous. Everything I, Abby, Dan, and everybody else who attended the webinar, and Amy, will have wanted. So thank you again, Marcus. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, because it's still probably 9 a.m. where you are, Marcus. See you again soon, I hope. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Bye.